Hey, everybody, welcome to What's Up Wednesday. I'd like to talk about a topic that I think a lot of us are familiar with, but maybe we don't recognize the term, which is imposter syndrome. I think that as I kind of describe this, everybody can relate to it because we've either done it or inevitably we've seen it within somebody. And I know, working in construction safety for many years, I've seen it up close and personal many, many times. And I know I've been guilty of it at times as well. And maybe to start out, the Wikipedia definition of imposter syndrome is it's also known as imposter phenomenon or impostorism. It's a psychological experience of intellectual and professional fraudulence. What that means is that when somebody doubts their skills and their successes, uh, they may not feel as talented or worthy as other people believe. And then they're afraid that people are going to realize that. So ultimately, I think where we run into this is we get into a situation. And before I dive into that, actually, I think that as we mature from, let's just say, our 20s, maybe when we start out in our career field until we get towards the end of our careers, we learn from our mistakes. And I think wisdom comes from mistakes. It comes from failure much more than it does from success. Or maybe that's just the way that I look at it. But ultimately, I believe that we learn by being that quote unquote imposter not to do it. And it's very simple or very easy for us to get into a situation where somebody leans on us. It could be in a meeting, it could be somebody asking us to solve a problem. And instead of immediately becoming vulnerable and saying, you know what, I'm not sure I'm an expert on this, or I'm not sure I have the answer, that it may be ego driven, it may be perception of credibility driven. We're going to jump in and we're going to try to solve that issue, even when we maybe don't have the education or experience to do so. That's kind of what imposter syndrome is, where we feel like we're an imposter. We don't have that information, but then we find ourselves stepping in that situation, if that makes sense. And ultimately, I think that what we hopefully learn over time is when we are faced with a situation like that, that we just stop for a moment, we show some curiosity, which I think is a solution for many issues. We ask questions to try to understand as best we can, and then we make an educated decision on what we do, whether proceeding forward because we have a better idea and we don't feel like an imposter, or we call timeout and we tell whoever it is or a group of people, if it's a meeting, that we're going to go do a little bit of research, get the answers, and get back to them. I think that's how you maintain credibility, is by not letting the ego or a fear that you won't look credible drive your behavior. And then you can look like a really big fool. I know I've got a couple situations I could think of very specifically. One of them was a person that actually worked for me more than 10 years ago. And I was on a job site in Pennsylvania. And I remember this person who was running safety on this project felt like in all situations, speaking louder than everybody else was the solution to making sure that everybody understood that he was in charge, that he knew more than everybody else. It was ego driven, and it was all about expecting and wanting credibility. And sometimes he probably didn't realize how, I hate to use the word dumb, but how dumb he looked when he did that, when people realized he didn't know what he was talking about. And I can count so many times I've seen somebody who speaks louder and talks more when they have no idea what they're talking about. And I think maybe to an extent, those people do not realize that they're imposters. Maybe it's shrouded by their ego. I don't know. But my one recommendation for anybody would be, if you find yourself in that situation, stop, show curiosity, ask questions, gather as much info as you possibly can. And then if you don't feel like you have what's necessary to either answer the question, solve the issue, contribute in some positive manner, then go back, do your research, ask for a period of time, and then make sure you follow through and get back to them. You're going to look a lot more credible by doing that than you are trying to solve something when you're not equipped to do so. So hopefully that helps. We'll see you next Wednesday.